Alright everybody, today we're going to be doing the final video in the 3K Overhaul series, and we're going to be fitting the turret today, and we're also going to be dealing with the little rotation mag bits and pieces, and fitting everything in the shell with our polycarb little brackets and everything, and then it should be pretty much ready to go. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install the pump into the shell. As you see, the pump fits right back in its stock position. There's a little ridge back here that this just sits in back here, but we have a problem up front where this pump extends out front here. See how this, you can't get through that part of the shell. Basically, you just need to Dremel this out here. And I'm going to do that off camera, and I'll come back on camera and show you guys about what it looks like. We're just going to make a little square hole here that'll fit the Hornet pump. You might have to remove a couple screw posts. I don't ever remove this one, but let's see. You will have to remove this one in the front of the shell, and you can just snip that out and it'll be all good. And then you can cut a slot pretty much in line with these tracks of the shell to about half of the width of the Hornet pump here. What we'll be talking about next is we'll be talking about the turret spring itself. Now, this is the stock spring that it has in it. As you see, there's almost no spring here, and it's very, very weak. You could use this, I suppose, if you wanted to. I like to upgrade the spring just a hair in order to get a little bit more power. Now, this one still is not a very strong spring. It is a good bit stronger than the stock one, but overall it's not that big of a deal. Now there's a couple factors that you need to think about when you're going to be choosing your spring. Now first off, the rotation mech is going to go back together like this, and usually you would have a cap retaining the spring. Now the stock one, of course, fits right onto this little nub here, and this thing screws into the back of the turret like in back there, and that's not going to work anymore for us. We need to get rid of the stock spring. Now, you have a couple different things to think about when you're choosing your spring. First off, you want to make sure it'll be able to sit in here, either in the groove inside here, or back on top of this, like this is. For example, this one has a coil that will slide into the groove, which is pretty much ideal. And this might be too much spring tension, but you can adjust that later. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to think about how big our new rear cap is going to be. Now we're going to be making this from the thin polycarb that I mentioned in the first video that you're going to need. This, I believe this is 1/8 inch polycarb. You don't want to use anything thicker than this, and usually 1/16 inch would be good, but I don't have any 1/16 on me. So basically we just need to serve the same function. We need to cap off the end of the spring and be able to tighten it down. As I said, this spring is likely too tight, and so we're just going to need to measure this out. What I like to do is I like to draw the stock piece back on here. I'm going to get down a little closer for you guys. And I like to just draw it out with like a blue marker or a Sharpie or something like that. And you're left with a circle. That one is going to be a slightly larger circle due to the Sharpie line. Now if you want to go ahead and mark your center on here, which is what I'll do in a minute with this, I'll just go ahead and mark a center. If I can get this thing, I'm kind of held up behind the camera, so I'm trying to do my best here. Here's an approximate center. So there's our little circle. Now this should usually be pretty good for our purposes, just slightly larger than stock. You cannot go too big, because when you screw it on, you don't want to interfere with this pin. This pin is going to be hooking into another piece of polycarb, which is right here, which is going to be glued into the shell. And this is what will index our rotation. So let's just go ahead and check that. Let me take a look from up here. That looks to be pretty much perfect. From my point of view, you guys might not be able to tell, but if you see there, you've got plenty of clearance right there, and we should be able to hop over top of our spring pretty easy. It just needs to be slightly larger, and it is. So I think this will work. I'm going to go cut this out in the scroll saw real quick. You guys could cut it with a Dremel, but be very careful. This is a small piece, and then I'll drill the center hole. I believe it's for 1/8 inch for this little bolt heel, but I could be wrong. You just need to measure and see what you come up with. Alright guys, once you get your little polycarb piece made, this little circle here, and you drill a 1/8 hole in the center, you're just going to slide in your little screw there and just set that off to the side. Then you remember that little pin that goes into this cross-drilled hole in the turret. You're just going to go ahead and stick that through about halfway on either side. Then you're going to take this part of the turret here, and you're just going to slide it back over and align it with the slots in the back and go ahead and push that over it. Now, then you take the other white piece of the turret and you go ahead and pop it right on. Then you put your spring on. I usually leave the finished end up and the other end down. That way I get that. You can see I've cut it down a little bit already, and let me get the show. It's got a little bit of pre-compression, maybe about 1/4 inch, and it's not very strong of a spring. So let's just go ahead and put this on, and then this screw will screw right back into the metal rod that is on the turret back here, and we will go ahead and screw that together. Nice and tight. It doesn't need to be like cranked down. You don't want to strip this out, otherwise your turret's garbage. And then you can see that's what we're left with. And look, let's listen to this little ratcheting sound that it makes. This is what we're going for. See how it just kind of ratchets itself and locks it into place? That's what we're looking for. So that way we know our turret is complete at the back. And now we can go ahead and fit it into the tank. One last thing I forgot to mention from the last video, we just want to bevel the edges of this craft foam just a little bit so they don't get really tore up. So you can just trim them at a slight angle with your scissors here. And this will just, you know, make it easier for the turret to slide over it or along the edges so it doesn't get all tore up. So we're left with a nice little beveled edge around there. We get all this crap off. Now the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to take some of our silicone lubricant and we're going to go ahead and smear some on top of the craft foam of the seal. Get a good bit in there. Just go ahead and slather it all over it. Try not to get any in the valve per se, although it wouldn't really hurt. Smear around the edges. Put a little more. We just want to have this good and lubricated, that way the turret on the back will slide through it easily. And then we're going to actually lube the back of the turret very lightly as well. I'm getting kind of close to the camera, guys, because I'm kind of huddled over it right now. Grab some more lube. Just lube everything up really well. You can't go wrong with lubing up a Nerf blaster usually, unless you're trying to paint it, which in that case don't lube the parts that you're planning on trying to paint, because then you won't be able to get the paint to stick. But other than that, that's pretty much what we're looking for. And then the turret, of course, will slide right into this hole at the top of the tank here. See, we've got kind of a frictiony from the lube, but that's good. I can tell right now that's actually going to be really nice. So as you see, this pin, this little hole, is going to be underneath the tank here. Now what we're going to need to do is, since we disassembled the turret again before we put it on, we were just test fitting before, is we're going to take our little pin again and we're going to squeeze the tank together with the turret, and we're going to just put this little pin through real quick. Let that hold it right there. And then we're going to take the rest of our rotation pieces, such as this piece here, and we're going to reassemble it over top of this. And we're going to go ahead and throw our spring on here, and our little polycarb disc. We're just going to screw her down. Alright, the next part we're going to be working on is we're going to be working on getting this pin to stay still inside of the shell. And this is going to be kind of hard to explain, so I'm just going to go ahead and try to explain it to you guys. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a polycarbonate part. We're going to be making a part from this 1/4 inch piece here that I've got, that I mentioned in the first video. And it's going to be going alongside this piece of the shell right in here. Just going to kind of sit in here and going to be glued in there. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of this little screw port here. And then we need to really sand everything in here and get this flat on the edge. And then I'm going to draw out a polycarbonate part. It's going to be kind of hard to explain on video. But basically we need to align our turret from the front with the tank. I'm not going to really be able to show that. Maybe pick up the camera a little bit. But we need to align our turret. Let me see, with the outlet of the tank. You're probably not going to be able to see that very well, but and then we're going to rotate this properly, and then we're going to need to make a part that can, let me pull this back down, a part that will hold this pin still in there. Alright guys, I'm having to freehand this so I can get in real close for you. But once you make your little part, it should set in here like this and be flat against the back of this. This is of course after you have, let me get in here, gotten rid of the little screw port that I mentioned earlier, and you have, it's kind of hard to see down in here, but you need to sand down in there really well with some rough grit sandpaper. And you can see how this is like meshing up with the little disc here. So basically the next step we're going to do is we're going to get some good quality liquid epoxy, and we're going to make sure that our turret is fully lined up straight with the barrel outlet, and then we are going to pull this back just a hair, lay some epoxy in here, and then we are going to press it in. Then we're going to let it dry. After all that's done, we are going to pull the whole tank assembly out, turret out, leaving only the little piece that we just made in. Now, then we're going to put a bunch of different adhesives around it. We're going to probably do some more liquid epoxy around it and some epoxy putty probably. But this piece does not need to ever come out or move again. If you get fancy, you can probably put some screws through it, but it can be kind of hard to do. So I'm going to go ahead and take this all out in a quick little time lapse, and then I'm going to show you guys what we're going to do. But first, like I said, let's go ahead and put some epoxy in there. Alright guys, now that we got the initial layer of liquid epoxy in here, as you see, this is very stout in there already since we went ahead and sanded really well before we did that. Now we're just going to take about this much of a stick of epoxy putty, and I'm just going to kind of pack it in this space here, in this kind of open area here, because this will tend to flex a little bit. And then I'm just going to pack it in around the rest of it. So let's just go ahead and mix it up real quick. And this is what we should be looking at when we're finished. My battery died, so I just had to cut this clip in real quick. Alright everyone, now that we got this piece in there, let's just go ahead and start assembling everything. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put in our tank and turret assembly. You can go ahead and twist off this little green or black, or there's a bunch of different colors that they've been, or you might not even have one. Just go ahead and twist that puppy off, and we're just going to go ahead and stick her in the shell. What you want to do is you want to insert the pin on the back part here. I don't know if you guys can see that, the pin on this. Go ahead and insert it into the hole, and then line up your tank and press it in where it is supposed to be located at. Might take you a little couple tries, but there you go. It just should seat pretty well, just like that. Yep. Alright. Now we're going to take the screws that we took out at the beginning of the build, and we're going to go ahead and put them in. I like to put the tank supporting screws need to go in first, of course, as that we are putting in the tank right now, obviously. Alright, now you see we've got the tank all nice and secure in there. Everything is lining up well, and it's all clicking together quite nicely. Now, the next step we're going to do is we're going to actually glue this trigger spring back here. Let me get a little closer for you guys. We're going to cover this trigger spring in glue, and that's just to make the trigger pull really firm rather than giving you some flex in it like this. We're just going to fill this spring up with glue so that it gets a nice strong pull back, and I'll go ahead and do that now. Alright everyone, now what we're going to start doing is we're going to try to getting the pump finished and finalizing the shell. One thing that we need to do is we need to get a block of something to put in here. I believe 1/2-inch PVC works, but you see what happens whenever you pull the pump all the way out. If you don't glue that cap down, you'll get a pump popping off every single time. I still also believe I don't need to plug that, I don't think yet. I forget if I plug them or not, honestly, but what we do for this is we just need to get a piece of 1/2 inch PVC and cut it to the exact length to fit in the front, against the front of the shell and against this pump. And you're also going to have to make a little notch in it to get around this screw port. And I'll go ahead and show you guys what that looks like when it's finished. And this is the general idea we're looking for. I actually did not have to cut that a notch out of the PVC to fit the screw port, but that's what we're going for. Just a piece of PVC 1/2 inch just to fill in this gap here so you can't get any pull out within the shell. And you do have to remove the pump handle for this. Alright guys, now we're just going to go ahead and take our goo gauge and we're just going to go ahead and glue it in real quick. What I do to get it more full like this is actually just take all these little screws on the back, remove the membrane, and put some dishwashing liquid in it, and it actually looks pretty cool. It's got kind of a cool effect with the bubbles. Now just make sure you put the rubber back in, otherwise you will get it all over the place and it will make a huge mess. Now it'll free rotate in there unless we put a little bit of glue in here, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in a couple drops of super glue on each one of these connections, just trying not to get any on the outside surface of the shell. So just go ahead and drop it in and just go ahead and hold it, and then it'll be done soon. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to actually run our tubing through the shell and actually go ahead and hook up the tank. What you're going to need is you're going to want to make sure you have your blue, I guess, can from back here, and you're also going to have that little spring that we removed from the tubing at the very beginning. So let's just go ahead and set our pump back in where it was. Make sure everything fits as nicely as it was. There it is. And we are going to get our blue, I guess this would be like kind of like a decorative piece, and go ahead and slide it in the back and run our tubing through it. Go ahead and lock it down, and make sure your tubing gets in this little notch in the shell back here, and lock her down. And then I actually like to usually take the tubing and actually run in this little gap under the goo gauge. Try to keep the tubing unkinked if you can. So there it goes, it's up through there. Then we need to make a nice gradual curve up here into the tank, so I'm going to cut it right about there with my pair of wire cutters, which are right here. Okay, then we're going to want to thread on our little spring here, and it might be a little bit tight on the tubing depending on what kind of tubing you buy, but it should go on. I have to force mine on a little bit. Then you're going to grab your little screw-on nut if you've got one. If not, you don't really need one, and if it's not going in easy, you don't really need one, because we will be super gluing this connection, and mine did go on, so we're just going to back off just a little bit on here, and we're going to make a nice gentle curve up and into the tank, and make sure that it will go over the nub real quick, and it does nice and easy. So we're going to get some super glue now, undo it of course, and we're going to put a little bit of super glue all the way around. Make sure your tubing is still nice and neat in here. I actually think I need to take a little bit more off, so let's just go ahead and do that real quick. Go ahead and press it on in there, and then tighten down this little nut real quick if you can get it down. And that'll just make sure our tubing is extra secure. And go ahead and straighten this spring back out to make sure this curve on here is nice and gentle, and it'll keep your tubing from getting kinked. That's the main purpose of this spring. So let's tuck that around there. And there is the air system for your 3K. It comes out of the pump back here, goes up, and it goes under in that little section there, and wraps up right into the tank. Alright guys, at this point we have the other half of the shell on, and everything is done internally. Now what we need to do now is we need to cut the rear loading slot. Now you can get pretty creative with this and pretty much cut whichever kind of slot that you want. I like to usually follow the contour of the shell. You want to stay probably about a 1/2 inch back from the front up here, just so you don't interfere with any of the turret retaining pieces. And I'll go ahead and draw that out and show you guys usually the shape that I use. Alright guys, this is the shape, about the shape that I usually use. Of course, I always modify it as I see fit to curve it out or make it look nicer. Um, but I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's finished. And after you finish all your cutting and sanding, you should come up with something nice and pretty as smooth as this. Shouldn't be able to cut yourself anywhere on it on the inside, just in case you're removing your hands and you won't want to slice your fingers. But now we're just going to go ahead and put the screws in, and I think it should be ready to go. Alright everyone, after that's all said and done, you should have a very war-worthy NIC primary. Now the 3K seal is at probably about 80 to 85%, which is more than enough. It's still shooting well over 100 feet outside with slugs. And the craft foam allows it to be easy to repair or easy to replace, while the rubber can be hard to work with, and it usually puts a lot of pressure from the bottom of the turret, which I've actually had the little rotation mech pieces actually crack when I used rubber. So there's a little justification when you lose a little bit of seal and gain a lot in reliability. So that's how I feel about that. It shoots really nicely. I just went outside and range tested it. I will be announcing the contest which gives this blaster away to my subscribers tomorrow. So if you want to make sure that you go ahead and get this blaster, make sure you're subscribed. And I'll be announcing how to win this blaster tomorrow. If you guys have any more questions about how I did this, just go ahead and ask me in the comments. I do not have any templates for that little rotation mech piece though. I make it custom every time, and it's just real simple. You just draw out a little piece and you cut it. It's not really that difficult. But the pump takes 7 pumps, and then you just pull the trigger as quickly as you can. And it's got, an enormous amount of power. It's definitely way powerful enough for NIC war, especially down here in the south. I did not load it with my Super Domes. When I test it tomorrow on camera, I will try it out with my Super Dome darts, which are just crazy powerful darts. Other than that, guys, turned out to be a very nice looking 3K. I'm very happy with it, and I would use this as a primary. So if you want a chance to win it, go ahead and subscribe and make sure you're here tomorrow.